bring the image of your Guru to your heart. And if you have no Guru, bring Hanuman to your heart. And we'll chant 3 times the Omkar. Each time praying that Hanuman gives us his blessings to understand Rama as he understood him. So breathing in. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. So now we are coming to Sundarkand. In fact, the Sundarkand is very, very powerful. In the whole of the Ramayana, people will not, if you can read only one Khanda, that is only one portion of the Ramayana, nobody will tell you generally read Balkand or Aranya Kand or Ayodhya Kand. Everybody says if you can read only one, read Sundarkand. Because Sundarkand is a very, very powerful part of the Ramayana. Now, first of all, Sundarkand has much to do with the number 5. And in the traditional setting, it is said that Panchamam Karya Siddhi. If you get ready to do any work, and if it is related to the number 5 in any particular way, then that work will be successful. So, if you remember when Sita was being carried away by Ravan, she threw down her jewelry, whatever she had, tied up in a cloth, and she dropped it on the Kishkinda mountain because she saw 5 monkeys sitting together. And so that was the first way it started in the Kishkinda Kanda. And you saw last time how he had come to the ocean, and how each one was talking about what they could do to jump across and come back, and how much they could swim and all that. And finally, it was Jambavan, who is one of the creations, direct creations of Brahma, the bear. He is the one who tells Hanuman that he says, you are capable of jumping across Lanka, and you are the only one who are capable of going and coming back, because when you were small, you did this and this and this, and then the God said that until the need arises, you will not know your own inner potential. And I am awakening your inner potential by bringing your awareness to it now, he said. So who was Jambavan was almost like what the Guru does to a disciple. You know, we think we are just ordinary, we associate or identify ourselves with the body and the mind and things, and the Guru, something happened. And the Guru comes and says, no, you're not the body, you're not the mind, you're something much higher, your potential is much higher. All you got to do is believe in it, because you are the child of God. So get up now and move. So that way the Guru blows, so to speak, on the embers of your heart, and then it comes up as a flame, your own heart. So this is the 5th Kanda in the Valmiki Ramayana, the 5th portion. It's important because Hanuman says the Ramayana story 5 times in this. This is the only Kanda in the Ramayana where certain mantras can be used to achieve certain benefits, including material benefits. Prayoga Vidhi, there is a lot in the Sundarkand. And so now we are coming to Hanuman. When Jambavan keeps telling him, now you are capable of it, this is your potential, all you got to do is believe in it, now you can get up and go across and come. As he is saying this, Hanuman becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger till his head is almost touching the sky. It's like it's an expansion of the Atma. And when he becomes so big, then he decides that he is going to leap across to Lanka. So he stands on that mountain there where they are sitting and talking near the ocean. And he puts pressure on the mountain so that he can jump for the momentum. And when he puts pressure on the mountain and he jumps, on that mountain there are many rishis sitting and meditating. Some of them only halfway through their tapas, the penance. And because of the momentum and the fury with which Hanuman went, these people were thrown off their seats and thrown upwards. So some of them reached moksha even before they were ready for it. That's what they say. And the mountain sort of like broke and crumbled under him, the lower portions, because of the weight with which he crossed over. So just to tell you one little thing, I sent you a picture. I'm sure you must have got it, no? On your phones. I sent it in Atlanta Yoga. It's just a brief understanding of what these things mean at a deeper level. So in the Upanishad, that is a Vedantic teaching, and in the Vedic teaching, they talk about two oceans. One is the higher ocean, the highest ocean, the ocean of luminosity, and it's called yeah, that's the picture. That's what you're showing me about Hanuman. Somebody is showing it to me there. But apart from that, there is I can see it from here, one of you there. But apart from that, there's a line drawing, if you see it. Anyway, if you don't have it, you can listen to what I say.
I send it to the Yoga Shakti group.
Okay. There is an ocean above, the superior ocean, which is beyond Prakriti. It's a transcendental ocean. And then there is an ocean which is below the human consciousness also. It's the below one is the inconscient ocean, where everything is dark. And when thoughts and vibration of thoughts and feelings come up, they are not coming from your brain. You are part of the whole structure of the universal consciousness. So what happens is these little thought bubbles come up in the inconscient ocean. They are half formed. They are not full. So they're just going around like little wavelets. And then something happens to make them come up. And then when they come up, they become thoughts and feelings. And then they are absorbed by your mind. So the mind doesn't generate thoughts. So when you start feeling guilty that, how can I think like this? Remember, you haven't thought it. The universe has thought it. The universal consciousness has thought it. You have opened your door to those thoughts. That's the one thing that happens. So, and you can choose which thoughts you want to come in, positive ones or negative ones. That's your choice. So you have that, and then these thoughts come up, they enter your mind, and then they become sort of formulated into little thought energies. These thought energies are called the Maruts, M-A-R-U-T-S. They are called the Maruts. There are 11 Maruts, basically. And out of all of them, at one time, Ravana, that is the demon king who kidnapped Sita, he is so devoted to Shiva. And the Maruts have something to do with Shiva, the thoughts and feelings. because they are very powerful forces. Thoughts can be very powerful. They can move you in any direction. So what he does is he cuts off each of his heads and sacrifices it to one Marut. Now there are 11 of them, and Ravana had only 10 heads. The 11th Marut was not propitiated. And it was this 11th Marut who comes down as Hanuman. So Hanuman is an aspect of Shiva. The thing is that when Shiva says that a lot of people are coming down, there are many gods and demigods, and means energies, cosmic energies, they are all coming to help Rama to liberate this Ravana and Kumbhakarna because they hate Vishnu so much. So it has to be a battle. It's not going to be a friendly hug and get on with it sort of. So because they're coming down, because it's a cosmic thing, he brings other gods along with him. Sri Rama, when he comes down, other gods come down with him. Not the whole of the energy, but an amsha of that energy, meaning a little portion of that energy comes down. And so in the same way, all the monkeys and all the people who come, they're all sacred energies that have been deputed to go and help Rama. And this was because when Ravana did such a height of penance, you will see that in your picture there, you have just above the inconscient ocean, there are 3 dimensions of consciousness: Bhuhu, Bhuvaha, Suvaha. The Bhuhu is the material world. Bhuvaha is the interspace, the pranic, pranamaya kosha. And Suvaha is called Dhyau in Vedic terminology. In regular terminology, it's what is called Swarga, Swar, where the divinity comes in that sense. Now, if you don't have a picture that I sent to Yoga, Atlanta Yoga, don't worry about it. I'll resend it and then you can remember this. So you have an ocean underneath in conscience. Then you have an ocean up there which is transcendental, aprakritik. There's a beyond prakriti. And in between you have this Bhur-Bhuva Swaha. And between the Bhur-Bhuva Swaha, which is called the lower part, lower 3, and the higher 3, which is the Jana, Tapa, Satyam. Jana is the people with Siddhis, Tapas is the people like the rishis who have left the bodies perhaps gone, and the tremendous amount of tapas shakti they have to keep the world going. And Satyam, Satyaloka is where you have the highest Ananda, the bliss. Now, in between the higher 3 and the lower 3, you have what is called the Maharloka. The Maharloka is something like the highest self, but it is like an ocean that you have to cross over. And when Hanuman flies over the ocean in Lanka, this is the symbol of it, that he has handled his Bhur-Bhuva Swaha, that is, his body is pure, his prana is pure, he is called the son of the wind Vayu, and his mind is pure also. He has got Chitta Shuddhi. How does he have Chitta Shuddhi? Because his one thought is only Sri Rama. He has come to help Sri Rama, his Shiva. Shiva meditates only on Vishnu and Vishnu meditates only on Shiva. So that is why if you go to Chidambaram temple, you will see that in Shiva's heart there is Vishnu. Then there's another statue where in Vishnu's heart there is Shiva, because they are both the same, different functions at different times. So then you have these Maruts, and they are still different thought forces. And then they join with Indra, or Indra joins with them. Indra stands for the enlightened or the luminous mind. So when that mind comes in, it sort of stabilizes the thought forces, the Maruts, and it brings that force brings the energies together. Now concentration happens because all the prana which is going in 5 different energies, in 5 different thoughts. If you see children, if you tell them, you'll say focus on your studies. Don't sit, look at your book and you're doing half your mind here, half your mind playing, half your mind with your friend, half your mind with the video game. All that is energy gets diluted. But supposing you gather all the energies and focus it, this child can become an Olympic winner or anything he sets his mind to. So what happens is Shiva comes in the form of Rudra, Rudratvam. And Rudra comes, and that is a form of the higher form of the Maruts. And what is Rudra? He comes straight from Agni. Agni and Shiva together. What is Agni, the fire? Agni is the will of the supreme consciousness, the divine. And that fire is there in everything in creation. That is, and that fire is supposed to be not only which sheds light on darkness, but it also gives power in weakness. So that is why the fire Agni is given so much importance in the Indian Shastras. For any ritual, you say Agni Sakshi. That is Agni Sakshi, meaning this is not my Sankalpa, this is his Sankalpa that is working in me. So you cannot go against it. So this Agni Tvam, that is that Agni, that fire, comes down along with Vayu. Vayu is the Prana, Mahaprana, and it manifests as Rudra. And what is Rudra? Rudra is the fierce aspect of Shiva. You make a mistake and Rudra will really give you a shaking up. Like this corona that has happened to the universe, this is like a Rudratvam. And then if you don't learn, then you get another hit. So that is what he's called destiny, in other words, the way people call it, and real good shake-up. Other energies will give a little bit here and there, a push up and down, but Rudra really takes on. So in the old days, the Vedic rishis, they were not afraid of any of the gods. The only god they were afraid of was Rudra. So Rudra is from Agni. That's why later on you will hear how Hanuman sets fire to Lanka. That Rudratvam comes out. That is when he shows the Rudratvam first. So then the Rudra pushes the Jivatma up by giving it nice hits along the way, makes you really start thinking about something. And then slowly, if you don't listen to Rudra, the Maruts will simply leave you and go away. They'll say, let's go and put our energies with somebody else who's interested. So now you have to coax the Maruts to come back. And what happens is, the human being, we are talking of human beings here, the human being goes and slowly persuades the Maruts to come back by surrendering to them. That is, till then you don't acknowledge that you can have a shortcoming. But now what happens is, you see your shortcoming, your shadows, you acknowledge it and you say, I will address it. Till then you are saying, I'm not like that, I cannot think like that. But now you know you can think nasty things, you can think things that you never thought you could think about. And you say, see, something that I have done is creating this. I have not kept my body pure, I have not kept my mind pure. And so let me do something about it. Now, remember one thing, when you say the body purity, remember your body and mind are supported by the Panchabhutas, which are made of the earth, water, fire, air, space. So if you damage the earth anywhere, I'll continue talking. Okay. If you damage the earth anywhere, it is going to have an effect on you. If you damage the water anywhere, like I can come to the US and I can defile the Mississippi, but I've defiled an aspect of myself, and so the water in me will be damaged. I don't have to do it in my backyard only. So when you damage the water, then you can't do much damage to the fire because it's a different quality altogether. And then you damage the air above you with pollutants. And the space also gets damaged because you don't bother about the other creations in the world. You think so long as I go up with my aeroplanes and my multi-story buildings, it's good enough. What does it matter if the birds are flying? They have no right to fly because we are the world's greatest species. So like this, then we damage the Panchabhutas and the body is not pure. How does the mind become impure? Because the mind is not thinking for itself. It goes on repeating like a parrot something that somebody else says, either your parents or the social situation or your friends and peers. You're not thinking for yourself. Is this right? Is this fair? Is this just? Am I being human? All this you're not thinking because life is just going on like a habit pattern. So then the mind also is not pure. And that is when Rudra will really smack you left and right till you sit up and notice it and you tell yourself, okay, I've learned my lesson. Let me do something about it now. So when you say something like that, then he'll give you a brief respite so you can do something. If you think you can fool him and get back to the good old way, you'll get another jolly good hit and that'll be really big. That is when at times Pralaya will come. So this happens, then Rudra sees that this person is actually looking at himself, seeing that he has shortcomings, and then he's addressing it and doing something about it, at least trying to do. You may not always be perfect, but if you start trying to do, if you have sincerity, then he'll come back as a benign force and will help you along the way. That's when you have Rudra, who is a benign force. So it's a beginning. And towards the end, you will have another major battle with Rudra, with the cosmos, with the creation, because you get all these qualities and you say, okay, I'm ready to come to merge with the Paramatma. But the Paramatma will say, yes, you have all these qualities, but it doesn't happen when you want. It will happen when I want it, because I am the one in charge. So there is this major fight between the Atma and the Paramatma. At that level, it's a major crisis. Eventually, if you have the Sharanagati, that's why they say at that point, Bhakti and Sharanagati help, then you are taken up. You become a Dasa of the divine. So you have in this the higher ocean, the lower ocean, the middle where you have the Bhurduva Swaha. Between that and the higher ocean is the Maharloka, which is not a reflection, it's a portion of the highest luminosity. So they will tell you that the Maharloka can be very tempestuous. Unless you have purity in your body and mind, you can't even cross it. For example, think of, you have to be very vigilant. You think of a situation where you have to go into a company to work, just an ordinary situation. And on the first day, the boss may be upset about some production things, and then he turns around and he glares at you because you've just entered. Maybe nothing to do with you, but if you're already a little suspicious then and sensitive, you will collapse there. So, and you will get very upset. Now, these are the things that the Prakriti puts us through because we have to learn to handle it without any bias, without any prejudice, seeing it as a blessing. And when you're able to do it, you get Chitta Shuddhi. But if you sit and moan and groan and whinge about it and you don't do anything positive, and because you're going through a bad phase, you give somebody else a bad phase, then Rudra leaves you there to struggle on your own and carries on with somebody else. Now, why I said this was to show you the similarity between the Vedic journey towards self-realization, towards the Paramatma, and the aspect of Hanuman crossing the ocean to take a message to Sita, who is the Jivatma, who has been kidnapped by the material world. You know, you come into the world with the prime idea of going back to your source, to Paramatma. But once you come here, what happens? You get so caught up in so many distractions on the side, so many temptations, you forget that you had come with a major agenda and you had the capacity to do it and you had the trust. Then what happened? You drop all that and you're going away on the side and playing around and misusing the energy that was given to you. So that is the sort of situation they are talking about. So they are in this story, they say, you have when Paramatma came as Sri Rama and Sita was also the mother, Durga, who came as a Jivatma because she's Prakriti. Then you have the Surya. Surya in the Vedic terminology is supposed to be the Paramatma. That is why Rama is said to be born in the Surya Vamsha. And Surya means the highest energy of illumination, not the Surya that you see, not the sunshine, because there are millions of suns in the various galaxies. But we are talking of the light, the self-luminous nature of that highest consciousness which is present also in the sun. So Surya in this story, Surya's putra is Sugriva, is Surya putra. Hanuman's guru was Surya Bhagavan. So when he wanted to give dakshina to Hanuman, to Surya, Surya tells him, don't give me anything, just take care of my son. Meaning, then Shiva comes, the Rudratvam comes, and he takes care of Sugriva, who is Surya Amsha. So Surya becomes his leader and he becomes like a dasa to Surya also. Then you have Indra, the illumined mind, and Indra is, his Amsha is Vali. So it is Vali in the beginning who gathers all the monkeys together. That is like Indra, the mind, gathering all the thought vibrations into one focus. So Vali is then the king of that place and all the monkeys are under him. And after the monkeys have gone together and when they are focused on searching for the higher, when they meet Rama, then Vali is redundant and he is killed. That's the symbolic meaning of that. Then with Sugriva, Hanuman goes, Sugriva tells him where to go and then Hanuman does the flying. So this is the sort of brief symbolic idea of the Ramayana. But now what happens to Hanuman? Rama calls him and he tells him, when you meet Sita, show her this ring so that she will realize that I have sent you. Now, why would Rama pick on Hanuman? He didn't know who was going to find. There were monkeys and so many of them, lakhs of them went in different directions. But somewhere he knew that Hanuman was going to find it because he's been observing Hanuman for a while. And he sees his dedication, his brahmacharya. He has no attachments of any sort. He is completely one-pointed. He speaks like a Vedic scholar. He speaks like a poet. His voice is very well in tune. His body is luminous. And he plans strategies on behalf of his master, Sugriva. So even when Sugriva didn't tell him that he has to make negotiation with Rama, he comes, he assesses Rama, and on his own he tells him, my master Sugriva will definitely be happy to meet with you and form an alliance. So he is the one who takes Rama and Lakshmana to Sugriva. So all this has been watched by Rama, and Rama calls him and he knows this is the man who's going to do it. So he gives him his ring, that is his authority. The king has his insignia, no? They will, like in the old days, they used to, if you put a signature on any of these documents, old days, grandfather's time, they would have that wax, red wax, and then they put a mudra on it to show that this is your seal. So like that, Rama gives him his ring as a seal, which is also like an authorization for him to go and meet Sita, because he knows nobody else will be able to go. So Hanuman, when he is flying and leaping across the ocean, he thinks to himself, if I keep it in my right hand, then it might fall into the water. If I keep it in my left hand, then it's not very respectful to the ring. So if I put it on my head, it will fall off. So what shall I do with it? And monkeys don't have pockets. So he puts it in his mouth. So he says it won't fall off. And that symbolizes that he kept chanting the Ramanama in a state of mauna. He didn't go on talking about it loudly, saying Rama, Rama. Not like that. It was a silent mauna repetition. And with that repetition, he leaps across, and on the way, the gods, the other energies feel, let us give him a little bit of rest. Because he's going to make such a big journey, and this is the first time he's doing something so major. So they ask a hill that has gone down into the waters, and they ask this mountain, please come up and invite Hanuman to come and sit on you so that he'll have a bit of rest. So this Mainaka comes up, this mountain. It is submerged in the ocean. It comes up, and as Hanuman is flying, he says, please sit on me for some time and rest and then go. Now Hanuman says, I can't rest now because I've got a job. And I'll finish that and I'll come back and rest on you. But thank you for being so kind. So Mainaka says, no, I'm not being kind actually. I'm repaying you for something that your father did for me. So he says that at one time mountains used to fly around. And Indra came and cut off their wings so that they will stop flying around and lie down there stable. At which time, when Mainaka was near the ocean, the Vayu Bhagavan came and said, I'll give you a help, and he pushes him down under the ocean so that he's protected. So that particular mountain can still come up and go down. So he doesn't get his wings cut off. So he said, I owe that to your father, my life. So I want to help you with this. I'm just paying a debt. So Hanuman says, no, when I come back, I'll take your blessings and I'll sit on you. Then he flies a little more, and then as he flies a little more, what happens is the gods say to themselves, this chap has gone so far, good. But he may have the competence, he may have the enthusiasm, but will he be able to handle the psychic forces? Now see, if it is not a Maharloka, why would they talk about psychic forces? It's just an ocean. So they call a Devata in the water. She is the goddess, deity of the psychic forces, and she is called Surasa. So they tell her, go and try to eat him up, and let's see how he manages the situation. So he is flying, and then suddenly she comes up from the waters. She is like the goddess of the Nagas. When you see the Nagas, the snakes, serpents, the serpents are associated with psychic power. That's why you will find in temples, you will have Kundalini, for example, is a serpent coming up. It shows a certain psychic power which is not logical, but you've got to handle it. So she comes up and then she says, I'm hungry and I'm so happy that God has sent you. This will be a good meal for me. 1 or 2 days I haven't eaten. So he says to himself, to her, he says, I can't come in and let you eat me now. I'm going on a very important errand. She says, no, God has sent you towards me. That means he has sent you for me as my lunch. So you've got to agree to it. Then he thinks for a minute and he says, why don't I do one thing? I'm going on an important errand. Let me finish it. And then having finished it, I'll come back and get into your mouth. So she says, no, how do I know? Everybody cheats these days. You'll go and then you'll disappear like that. So then he thinks, and she says, all I'm asking you is to enter my mouth. That's all she says. So he says, okay, and he makes himself big. Once he becomes big, she opens her mouth bigger than him. Then he becomes much bigger. Then she becomes still bigger, opens her mouth. So like this, they go on until he's about 2 or 3 miles high and her mouth is 5 yojanas high. And then he suddenly becomes small, goes into her mouth and comes out. So he said, I did what you wanted me to do. I went into your mouth, I've come out. So she says, okay. And she blesses him and she says, let your thing be victory. Now you must remember, why Sundarakand? Why is it called Sundarakanda? Because in the Ramcharitamanas, they say there are 2 Vijnanis. Vijnanis are people who go into the psychic dimensions. And one person is Valmiki, the other person is Hanuman. Nobody else is called a Vijnani there. And he takes the role of the Guru when he takes the ring from Paramatma, Rama, and says, I will give it to Jivatma. Meaning that Guru brings the authorization from the divine and gives it to you and says, look, he's waiting for you, the Paramatma. And when he does meet Sita later, the 3rd Sita Kalyanam will happen, which only a Guru can do. That is, as soon as the disciple is met, he will immediately join the disciple's Sukshma Sharira with the Paramatma Sukshma Sharira. That is what the Guru does. And which is not seen by the disciple at that time, but much later when the mantra becomes your inner body, you realize that this was what the Guru has done for me. It takes a long time to recognize. So then what happens is, he is going ahead and he comes across another Rakshashi sort of. And her Angaratarika, what she does is, she has done a penance in which she has a siddhi where she can catch any person. Excuse me 1 minute. Sir, I'm in a class, I'll call you back. It's okay. So, she, Taraka, and he sees her. She has done a penance in which she has a siddhi that she can invoke a person into a shadow and then hold that person by holding the shadow. You understand? That is, sometimes we bring an idol and to keep it in the temple. So what do? We don't just go and keep a statue like we keep at home. The priests will come, they'll say so many mantras and all that, and they'll put their prana into it and they will do what is called prana pratishta. Your prana with your mantras is transferred into that statue and the divinity is invited to come and stay in that statue. This is prana pratishta of the statue. Now, there are some people who in the tantric methods, they will keep a lamp over a yantra and then they will invoke the particular deity into that lamp and into that yantra. And when the energy of that deity comes there, they keep that energy and ask for whatever they want, or the worship or devotion or whatever. And when it's done, they say, okay, you can leave now. Now, in the same way, there are people who can invoke the divinity or invoke any person into a shadow. And then when you get into your shadow, because that's your shadow, they will take that particular shadow and they will catch the shadow, and in the process they catch you also. Like God is, the divine energy is caught in a lamp or in a statue. These people have the capacity to hold the shadow and bring them. So they're very highly evolved in their own way, but not necessarily liberated. So she does this, and once she does this, then Hanuman wonders who's doing this. He comes down and he sees her, and she also says, now I need to eat you because I'm a Rakshashi and I'm hungry. So he knows there is no other way. He makes himself small. He goes into her mouth, into her intestines. Then he becomes big, and then he, what would you call it? Tears her body and comes out and leaves her and goes out. Now you've got to remember, this is what I was coming to tell you, that all siddhis in the Patanjali Yoga Sutra mentioned by him are exhibited by Hanuman at different times. For example, where you have a siddhi, when you do a certain technique and you go into deep meditation and you get more and more in command of the earth, the water, the fire, the air, and you have that control to a large extent, then you have what is called the a youth, a youngness coming into your body. You don't look old. You become luminous. You become handsome. Handsome in the sense, you may not meet the Mr. World records, but you are so charming that people get drawn to you. And you can see how people get drawn to people who might not be good looking in the regular sense of the word. It's not a physical beauty. It's an inner divinity that pulls them towards himself. So that is called Sundara. And Hanuman had that quality. And he had all these qualities of Anima, that is becoming small, Garima, heavy, because the mountain broke under him, Laghima, he becomes light, Mahima, he becomes large, Prapti, the capacity to reach anywhere, Prakamya, the capacity to get any desire fulfilled without obstruction, and Vashitva, the control over the object that he is trying to get, and Ishitva, the capacity to create, sustain and dissolve, almost as if he has reached the transcendental level, because he is an Amsha of Shiva. So now what happens is, these are the qualities he exhibits on this Sundarkand time when he goes to meet Sita. So you know that this is not just an ordinary monkey. Now the other thing is, when you get these skills, this skill set, these perfections, you can first of all do those sadhanas, that penance, only when your body and mind are pure to start with. And if you have freedom from attachment or pride, if you don't have that, and if you're misusing it, that is, you're using it for your own personal selfish end, you can damage your Sukshma Sharira, or you can damage yourself. Your soul itself can be damaged in that sense, and you might have to come back and go through many lifetimes doing the repair till you're back to square one. So usually when gurus teach also, they will not give these techniques to people ordinarily unless they've tested and tested and tested them. And otherwise life will test you and test you and test you till you are capable of being righteous. That you might have a power that is given to you by virtue of your penance or your karma, but you cannot use it for your own personal aggrandizement, or to handle somebody because you're prejudiced against them, or because you're favoring them. All that is a selfish misuse. If you do that, then you get into trouble. So generally you don't get it unless you become very, very oriented, synchronized with the divine will. So this is what he did, Hanuman. Let me know 5 minutes before the time, 11:50. Okay. And then he goes, and then he stands, he reaches Lanka, that is where Sita is. And when he reaches, there is a person, a bodyguard there called Lankini. And she is as fast as he is. Because Lankini, if you know, Lam is the mantra of the Prithvi, the earth, the Mooladhara chakra has Lam as its Bija mantra. So she is the power of the Mooladhara chakra, the power of the earth, the land there, which belongs to Ravana, because Ravana also has done a lot of penance. He has a lot of these um, great siddhis and skills, but he misused it. And because he misused it, he has to be removed from that particular position. So then he comes there, and then she comes running to him, and then she says, "Who are you, and how dare you go inside?" So because she's obstructing his going in, he gives her hits her with his fist, and then she says that she was kept here to safeguard Lanka, that is Ravana's ill-gotten land with all the negativity in it, because only she could handle it. But when she asked the creator why she was stuck here and when she would be liberated from here, she was told that one day a monkey will come and he'll hit you with his fist, and that day you will be liberated. So she's very happy, and she blesses Hanuman, and she says that you have today liberated me with hanging around here and being a security guard for all sorts of negativities. Now you go in and do well. Now what happens is he jumps over the wall, and when he jumps over the wall, he lands on his left foot. These things are emphasized because when you use your left foot, you are triggering your right brain. And the right brain is intuitive. It's also very picture-oriented, color-oriented. When you do something with your right foot or your right hand, you are stimulating your left brain. Left brain is very logical, sequential. So when you, in India, if somebody has to give you money or take money, or you take food or anything, they say use your right hand, not your left. Why do you do that? Because if you take money from somebody, or say you're rushing out to work, you just leave it somewhere and you go off. In the evening you come back and you say, now where did I leave that money? I had 2,000 rupees. Now your right hand has already put this information into your brain, and the left brain is so logical and sequential that you can go, okay, I went there, I was standing here, he came through that gate, I spoke to him, then next what happened, this is what he said, I took the money and I kept it here. So you can go and search there. On the other hand, when you're going into war, logic will not help. You have to know the mood of the enemy, the strategy of the enemy, because he's watching you and trying to understand your moods. He's looking at what is your vulnerable point. Any war anywhere, you go into a case, legal case, the same thing happens. A lawyer is watching to see what is your weakness, and then he is going to hit you there. So you have to understand emotion, and you have to understand colors. Logic will not help. So when you go into war, you always put your left foot and enter. When you're going into a home where you are supposed to bring something beautiful or happy, like when a new bride goes to the bridegroom's house, then they say enter with your right foot. So he now puts his left foot and enters, because of which he is already priming himself. This is the Shastra in warfare. It's part of that, means he has learned all that. That's what it means. So he is already priming himself to go inside that place. He's only been told, go give the ring to Sita, explain to her, reassure her and come back. But being a messenger of his caliber, he not only does that, he goes not only just reassures Sita, he shows her that he is capable of carrying her back himself if he wanted, because he could be huge. He makes his figure very huge, because she says, what can a little monkey like you do? So he makes himself so huge to show her and reassure her that this is possible. And then after reassuring her, he goes and he thinks it's not right to just go back without two things. One thing is he has to carry information to Sri Rama about the layout of that place, because we are coming to war. And the second thing is he has to let Ravana know that Rama is not just some sort of a small fry, you know. So even his attendants, his dasas, his soldiers are equally brave. So what does he do? He goes and shakes the trees. But before that, let's go to his meeting with Sita herself. He goes through the palace, Sri Lanka, the king's palace, Ravana's palace, and then it's such a beautiful palace. After Mooladhar, where do you go? Swadhisthana. Swadhisthana is a world of luxuries, desires. So when he goes in there, he sees the palace is all gem-studded here. Pillars are gem-studded, gold, silver, silks on the floor. Beautiful women lying in various sensual postures with garlands, some singing, some playing on a musical instrument, some hugging somebody else. So he goes through all this and he says, they're so beautiful. I wonder whether Sita could be one of them. And then he blames himself. He said, how could I even imagine Sita would be in such a situation? He goes through all that and comes out. Now, this is to show that Hanuman was so one-pointed and he was not in the least attracted by the material world. So, and Rama knew that. So he was the only person who could be trusted to go through that palace, which was so tempting and so beautiful that he would not get distracted on his job. So he goes through that. Then he thinks to himself, now, let me pray to invoke the energy of Surya, my guru, Vayu, my father, that is Mahaprana, then Sri Rama and Sita, and Ganapati, of course. So he makes an invocation to all of them and he says, now I'm going to be doing this, please give me your blessings. And immediately it strikes him that she could be in a park-like place that he sees through the window. So whenever you do anything, it's always good to pray to the energy of that particular place. That's why I kept this Hanuman here. I don't know how many of you saw it, but I prayed to this Hanuman before I started that I don't say anything wrong because I'm talking about him. So then he went out and when he went there, he became small, sat like a tiny monkey on the tree. And he saw Ravana coming there with all his beautiful wives and soldiers and people. And then he comes there and he tells Sita, he says, why do you have to sit here and be so miserable and languish like this? After all, Sri Rama was like a beggar. He had nothing, not even his own kingdom. And what will you get out? By the time 14 years are over, Bharata would have even taken the palace, the kingdom, and you won't have anything to go back to. Instead of that, if you become my wife, he says, I have lakhs and lakhs of soldiers. I have thousands of people who guard me and who will happily follow everything I tell them to, and you can be my principal queen. There is nothing that you will want. And on top of that, I have this Pushpaka Vimana, which I've fought with my own half-brother Kubera and got. We can go around the world and have a good time looking at everything. So you see, those days you didn't ever talk to a man straight. If you were a married woman and he was a married man, you didn't want trouble. So she didn't have anybody else there. So she takes a piece of straw and she puts it between her and what's his name? Ravana. And she says, how dare you ask me to even think of somebody like you who is such a promiscuous and lecherous person, and you're like a fox, like a jackal. And Rama is like a lion, and I love him among everything else. And she says, you think I cannot burn you and the whole of Lanka if I want to now? Because now she's bringing up her Durga aspect. So she says, in a jiffy I can burn the whole of Lanka, but then I'm not doing it because I want that Rama should come and take me and go. This is where she becomes the Jivatma. You don't depend on anything else in life, not on your power, not on your position, not on your money. You enjoy it, have it all. But don't think that is going to be a permanent solution for everything in life. So she says, Rama himself has to come and take me home. So when she tells that to Ravana, he gets mad. He is really very angry. He says, if you don't listen to what I tell you to do, then I'll give you 2 months. If you don't agree to me, I will cook you and have you for breakfast. So that's the amount he loves her. You can see that because they're Rakshasa and they eat human beings. So she cries a little bit naturally in that sense. And then he turns to these other guards, the Rakshashis or ugly looking guards, and she tells them, listen, you got to persuade her. First tell her nicely about all the things I can give her. And if she makes of us, frighten her a little bit. This is the way good thief, good police, bad police. That's the way you can weaken a person's resistance. So he said that, and all these Rakshashis, the lady Rakshashis, they all agreed, and then he was taken back, Ravana. After Ravana went, Hanuman thought to himself, poor thing, how will I go and talk to her about Sri Rama, because she might think I am also a Rakshasa because they can change forms and I might scare her. So he sits on that tree and he starts gently talking about the Ramayana, about what happened, how Rama was born and how he married Sita and how he went into exile and how she was carried away. All this he speaks in the dialect of Kausalya. So not everybody will know the Kosala dialect and that accent. So then she's wondering, who's speaking in the language of that place that I come from? And then he gently gets down and he says, it's me and I have come from Rama. And he gives her the ring to see. And she is sort of like, she's so happy that he brings the ring to him. And she tells him 1 or 2 little things. Because she says, when you go back, you have to tell Rama that you met me. And just like he gave me something to remember him, you have to give him something, otherwise he may not believe you. So she takes her, they call it Shirobhushanam, the ornament of her head. So what is the ornament of the head for a Jivatma or anybody for that matter? The ornament of the head is bending it at the feet of the divine, Sharanagati, placing your head at the feet of the divine. So that is why they say that when you see the ornaments on the deities in the temples, don't get carried away by the ornaments because they are only symbolic of certain qualities that the divine has. Because the divine can get gold and diamonds from anywhere, it all belongs to him anyway. So it's not that the ornaments are beautiful on the deity gives it beauty, and otherwise they're only charcoal pieces over millions of years. So she gives him her Shirobhushanam, meaning that she says, I have given my head, my ego is placed at Sri Rama's feet. So she tells him 1 or 2 stories so that he'll also know about her. She says, on one occasion, when we were walking, it rained and my bottu had gone off, the tika on my forehead. And Rama will bend down, take the soil, the wet soil, and place it there. So you should not be without bottu. And she says, these little things I'm telling you, which nobody knows. This is a very confidential thing. So if you tell Rama, he'll know definitely you met me. And then she tells him also about the crow, the Kakasura. Once Jayanta, that is Indra's son, sees her and he wants to hurt her. So he comes and Rama his head is on Sita's lap and he is sleeping. this crow comes and tears her breast with his claws, and the blood drips. And she doesn't say anything because she doesn't want Rama to be disturbed. When he gets up, because the blood falls on his face, and he gets up and he sees her bleeding, he says, "Who did this to you?" So she sort of says, "No, it's nothing." Then when he tells her, she shows him the crow. She says, "That's a crow that did it." So what he does, he takes one bit of darba grass, kusha grass, and he puts the Brahma mantram in it, and he sends it to kill that bird because he's so angry that somebody dare do it to Sita. And that is how the divine protects his bhakta, the Jivatma, because anybody hurting the Jivatma is something that the divine will not accept. That is why in all these stories you hear that the gods like Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva will say, we wait to have a darshan of a bhakta because that purifies us. That's the way they say it. So this bird flies, and this thing is flying behind him to annihilate him. So he flies, and then he goes to Indra, and that's his father, and he says, "Please protect me." Indra says, "Who did you go and irritate now?" So there's a chap called Sri Rama sitting there. I went and scratched his wife's breast. So he says, "Sri Rama, don't come anywhere near me because I cannot handle his anger. You go and ask Vishnu or Shiva or somebody." So he flies to Shiva, and Shiva says, "I can't handle it." Goes to Vishnu, and Vishnu says, "You can't play around with Rama because when Rama sends a missile, it hits the target. You have to go back and ask Rama's mercy. Go and apologize to him." So this thing comes flying right back and is so scared with this missile following him that he falls in front of Rama, and he's so breathing so hard. But when he falls, what happens is his tail is towards Rama and the face is away from Rama. So how can you ask somebody for something? And it is Sita who, out of her Daya, she's called the Daya Murti. Prakriti is where the mother is very compassionate. In her presence, the divine is also compassionate. So she reaches over and she turns the crow so that its face is looking at Rama and the tail is away. So then he says, "I'm sorry," and all that. Rama says, "I've already taken out a missile. When I send a missile, it will hit the target. One wife, one word, one arrow. This is Rama's characteristics." So he said, "Now what shall I do?" And then he says, "Which eye looked at Sita with that nasty thought in your mind? I will remove that eye with that missile." So that eye removed the eye, the missile removed the eye. That's why if you see a crow, you will see it will always look like this to the side, like to the side. It won't look straight at you. So they say one eye has gone. And it says ka kaha, ka kaha, ka kaha. It says, no? The crow, that in Sanskrit, ka means who, except kaha, her and him. Kaha means her, ka means him. Who except her and him can be so merciful even though I have hurt them. So whenever the crow says ka ka, this is what it's saying. So then Sita is telling Hanuman the story, and she says, these things only Rama and I know, because naturally they didn't talk about it to anybody. And so she says, if you go and tell Rama about this, remind him of this, he'll know that you definitely met me. So he's very happy, and he says, okay, now bless me, I'll go. And when he comes, he tells her that I am Rama's messenger. Dutoham, he'll say, I am the Duta, the messenger. And she will look at him like that, and she gives him Diksha. Because at one time, he tells Sri Rama that I have two relationships with you. At one relationship is you are the Lord and I am the servant. Another relationship is I am your son. So Rama tells him, no point my saying you're my son. Go and ask the mother to accept you first. So when he goes there, he calls her mother 9 times. In other words, he is calling upon Durga. Durga is Navakshari, 9 letters to her mantra, 9 forms of Durga. So when he calls her 9 times, Sita, who was just a Prakriti, part of Prakriti, a Jivatma, becomes Durga. And she looks at him with a great compassion, and she gives him Diksha. There are 2 people to whom Sita gives Diksha in the Ramayana. One is Bharata, when he comes to ask Rama to go back. And the other one is Hanuman, because Hanuman was a jnani. He was a very evolved soul, but there wasn't much of bhakti in him, devotion, not as much. So she gives him the bhakti Diksha. And after that, the Dutoham, that is, I am a messenger, becomes I am a servant, Dasoham. So then after all this, he goes there and he shakes a few trees, breaks the trees in that park so that the soldiers will come running, and then they go and tell Ravana, look, there was a monkey that was sitting on a branch. It suddenly became big and it was having a little chat with Sita, and it's now breaking the trees. So Ravana will think this must be just some sort of like a Rakshasa, someone who can change his form, and he'll send his eldest son, Akshay Kumar. He'll say, go get that monkey and come. But when he goes, Hanuman gives him such a fight that the monster dies. And then Ravana gets scared because he thinks, Akshay Kumar was very brave. Now what to do? So he'll send his son Indrajit. Indrajit is not just a great warrior, he is a Devi Upasaka. And when he prays to Chamunda, he cannot be defeated easily. But here this is Shiva, Hanuman. So he goes there, he fights, and then Hanuman thinks to himself, I can always defeat him, but if I keep defeating him, what's the point? I'll never know what he has come for and who he is. So he throws a missile at Hanuman, and Hanuman allows himself to be bound by it. That's the word they use. Because he could have fought, but he lets himself be bound by it because he thinks that's the only way I will be taken to Ravana, and I can see Ravana and get to know him and also give him a bit of a fright. So they drag him to Lanka, to the palace court, and Ravana is sitting there, and then he looks at him and he thinks, this little monkey, and what nerve he has. He's killed one of my sons and then he's brought here all tied up. And he thinks to himself, monkeys love their tails a lot. So let me humiliate him. So he tells the guards to set fire to Hanuman's tail. So Hanuman lengthens his tail, makes it thick. So when they come and they finish all the clothes in Lanka, people, saris, their sashes, their veils, everything is used, dipped in oil so that it will catch fire quickly, and it is not enough. So they are running hither and thither to get some cloth, and then he allows himself to become smaller and to let himself the tail be set on fire. So he is taken out, and the minute they take him out, he knows that when you use this missile with the mantra to tie him up, if you also tie him up with natural fiber, organic fiber, the power of that missile goes, because he is very learned. But Indrajit also knew that, but he didn't know Hanuman knew it. So Hanuman just pretended to be tied up, and the minute these people moved away, he shrugs off that missile that's tying him, jumps on and sets fire to every building. And as he's setting fire, he's looking at the whole topography of that place, the geographical thing, which is the king's palace, which is the ministers, which is his eldest son, which are the queens. So he sees the whole layout, and at the end he hears somebody chanting Om. So he thinks to himself, in such a negative place, who is there who can be chanting Om? So he steps in there into that little place which is not on fire. And he goes there and he sees Vibhishana, that is Ravana's brother. And he asks him, who are you? He says, I am Vibhishana, and I have been always waiting to serve the divine. And Ravana says, you will get your chance. Why are you sitting here and chanting? You should be up there advising your brother. So they say that unless you meet the Guru, you don't get to meeting the divine. So when Hanuman met Vibhishana, then after that Vibhishana was able to meet Rama. So then he comes out, Hanuman, and another symbolic thing they say is in the old days, people had fire in their homes. The same fire was used for cooking. Then if somebody died, they would cremate them with the same fire. And the local temple will be closed for so many days. So they would say, if you have a fire in your house, somebody, if you don't have the fire, for example, you don't go and borrow it from your neighbor, like you borrow sugar or coffee. You don't take it from somebody else. If you take it, you have to give it back, the fire. So that was part of the Shastra that Hanuman was showing when they set fire to him and he gave the fire back to Lanka. And then he thinks to himself, my goodness, I've been burning the whole of Lanka. What happened to Sita? Maybe she's also burnt. But now Sita is Durga. So Sita says, if there is any merit in me to the Agni, to the fire, she says, don't burn Hanuman. So he realizes he's not burnt. He comes back and then she is sitting there and she says, put your tail into your mouth because it's burning. So he puts the tail in his mouth and it goes off, and that's why they say he has a red face. If you see in temples, Hanuman's face will be shown as red. So these are little stories in between, not that that is necessarily true. So he comes to Sita and he tells her that I tried telling Ravana to leave you, but he didn't listen to me. And why did he do that? Because he was Rama's Ishtadevata Shiva. He wanted to initiate Shiva into the Rama mantra and tell him, give back Sita and Rama will forgive you and everything will be fine between you both. He will bless you. He'll help you also to turn a good path. But Ravana didn't recognize because so much was his Maya and Moha. Moha is infatuation with Sita, and it clouded his mind. He didn't even recognize when his own guru came and stood in front of him. And he had one characteristic. He always used to say, I'll do anything, but I will never do the Anjali Mudra. Anjali Mudra is this. I will never bow my head to anybody, ever. And that is what was his undoing. So then you had this happening, and then he goes to Sita and he tells her, if you want, I can take you right now on my shoulders. So she says, no, you can, I know you can do it, but I want Rama to come and rescue me. It is his duty and he'll have to do it. So he says, okay, I'll tell him that, and then he flies right back on the way he pats the mountain, Mainaka, and then he goes to back to Bharatvarsha, that is back in India. And when he comes, he tells Angada, Angada is Bali's son, he's the prince regent. He tells him this is what happened, he explains everything. So the monkeys who went with him are so happy. They go and they enter a park sort of place where they have trees hanging on the fruits. They go there, they eat all the trees and they make such a mess of that place. And Rama says, why are they doing that? And Sugriva says, no, no, don't get angry with them. When they come like that, it means they're bringing good news. So somebody must have found Sita. So Hanuman will come there, and this is often quoted. If somebody is very anxious to know the fact, someone is in the hospital, you're concerned what happened, Now, when that person comes back, if you're anybody other than Hanuman, you would say, I went there and I took this cab, and when there was a traffic jam along the way, and you will be itching to know what really happened. It's okay, get on with all that. Tell me, is he okay or not? That sort of thing. But it's a wait. I want to tell you, I met this doctor, and this is what the doctor said. Is she okay? So what Hanuman knew that he was a sensitive person. He went to, when he meets Rama in the Tamil Kamba Ramayana, I mean, Kandeen Sitayai. I've seen Sita, bas, seen. So Rama is relaxed, Sita. And that is the way one should be sensitive to another person's anxiety when you are reporting something to them. So that is so far, and we'll go on to the next remaining later. So this is the beauty of the Sundarkand, where Hanuman shows his glory as Shiva, as Rudra, and as a messenger par excellence. And even when he comes later, when Rama asks everybody the opinion, everybody will give their opinion about situations without knowing much. Hanuman would know the whole lot. He'll just stand quietly at the back. Only when he is called, he will say something to Rama. So that was his humility and his propriety, how he understood space and the limits and how far he can go, how far he cannot go, and he obeyed them properly because he was with Satyam, the truth inside. Rama was the truth. And when he was with the truth, he had nothing to fear, nothing to lose, nothing to get tempted about. So that's what they say we should do. When we live in the world, live, enjoy, do what you need to do. What you don't need to do, don't do it. But always keep the divine within you. By whatever name you call him, Rama, Krishna, Jesus, doesn't matter. There is a supreme power, and that supreme power knows much more than we know, because it knows the whole, we know only a part. So we are limited, we are finite. That power is infinite. So we keep that power, the memory of that divinity in your mind. And that's what they say about Rama, even more than Krishna. You say Rama and you start any job, it turns out well. So what's the time now? 11:48.
Why more Rama than Krishna, auntie?
Because
Why did you say Rama?
Two reasons. One thing is that Rama was very straight in his behavior. Rama was at a time when the world was a little more disciplined. You had either the good people or the bad people. It was very simple, straightforward. By the time Krishna's time had come, civilization had grown. People had evolved so much more, and then the greed and the lust and all this came in. The differentiation became so much more diverse. And so people started having double qualities. You could be a nice person. Duryodhana was nice to Karna, but he could be nasty to the Pandavas. So you had good and bad within you. So it needed somebody of Krishna's qualities who could see the whole, who could allow people to play games even if they're doing bad, and then find their vulnerable spot and hit them. In Rama's time, they were straight. So Ramayana is full of these. And then the word Rama itself, Ra is fire, Ma is the Jivatma. It's a fire of your soul. So, and Rama lived to show people how you can be an ordinary person and yet you can live in a dharmic manner. You can follow the rules of your time. Whereas Krishna, knowing the whole thing, would cut corners because that was called Visesha Dharma. There are two dharmas, Samanya Dharma and Visesha Dharma. Samanya Dharma means the righteous way of living in the world, going by the rules. Visesha Dharma means somebody of a high evolution will know the whole. So when he knows the whole, he knows someone is putting on an act and maybe he is partly good, but he is damaging the cosmos. You might find somebody who is very good, but he might be going around cutting trees or polluting a river. But otherwise, he might be a great philanthropist going around with looking after orphanages and senior citizens' homes and all. He'll have a mixture of that, but same time he can go around polluting a river. So you have somebody like Rama would only know either you strike him or you bring him and he says sorry and you let him go. But Krishna will look at it in a wider way. He'll see, if I leave this fellow today, how much damage is he going to do? So even though he might have these good qualities, he needs to be put away for this moment. So it's difficult to understand Krishna. Rama, it's easy to understand. And Rama, you have to go searching for him because he's always running away. Krishna, sorry. Rama will come to you. You say the Ram Nam and he'll come to you.
Ji, I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, initially in this conversation, we were saying that Hanuman, when he went into Lanka, he put his left foot in, so he could actually see the emotions and colors of the people, right? And when we go to some new home, or like you get married and you go to somebody's house, we put our right leg because right leg activates our logical thinking. So my question here is, shouldn't we be emotionally attached actually?
No, you don't go to somebody's house unless you're emotionally attached. You don't go there to fight with them unless you're a person who's given somebody a loan and then they're not repaying it. So other than that, when you go, you're anyway going with friendship. So it's not the first time you're stepping in there. You're talking of the first time you're stepping in there.
Oh, okay.
So even if you're going the first time, put your right foot in and enter. Because you will know logically who is in the house, where is the placement, which is the puja, where does the senior citizen sit there, where are the children playing. All these things will give you an idea of which spaces you can enter, which you don't enter, how you handle the people in those spaces. This is a matter of logic. So you put your right foot in and you enter. Usually, if it's a friend's house. We rarely enter an enemy's territory unless you're in the armed forces or something like that.
Thanks, Ji. Ji, this
Auntie.
is a question from last time. So you want to go ahead, Priya? Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, you finish. Whatever you want to say, go ahead.
Okay. This is a question from last time. I think you posted, Priya. So
Yes.
you want to ask
The
to Auntie?
why Arjuna was had the privilege of Gita Upanishad from Krishna. You said you're going to tell us next week, Auntie. Yes,
Yeah.
Auntie.
Yeah. Because of all the people who were in the war. This was he had grown up with Arjuna. They were cousins. And they were
Right.
very good friends. This is a Sakha Bhava. And then when he goes into the war, and he is the first one to go into any war. He fought with Shiva, he fought with so many people. He is not a coward by nature. But when he came to the Kurukshetra war, everybody is blowing their conches, and suddenly he gets this existential fear and he sits on the ground. He said, I'm not going to fight. It's like a kid, going to school, goes with great enthusiasm, suddenly looks at the school and feels anxious and says, no, Papa, I'm coming back home. That's all. So who will Papa pay attention to? To the person who is breaking down, not necessarily to the person who is feeling strong. And he used that opportunity because Arjuna also tells him, be my guru and teach me now. Because I don't understand anything. He said, all I know is I'm depressed, I'm not able to do anything. I can't think, my bow is falling from my hand, I'm perspiring, and my heart is palpitating, and I don't know anything about why it's happening to me, because he's a warrior. And he says, now you tell me what to do. Before he says, be my guru. And then Krishna will tell him, how can you be so impotent actually at this moment, because you're the one who wanted to come into the war. I didn't tell you to fight. In fact, I went out of my way to say, okay, let them go. He went as a messenger also to take, diplomats sort of. And he said, after all that, I gave you all the option. You said you want to go and fight. So I said, okay, if that's the way it is, I'll come with you that way. And you chose me. So having come so far, see, look at all these other people who have all come for your sake. And suddenly if you drop everything and go back, what happens to all these people? There are soldiers, thousands of them, horses, elephants, their families. So many people have come to give their lives for you. You come till here and then you suddenly go back. That is cowardice, he says. And you're a Kshatriya. Kshatriya's job is to protect Dharma. And that is why you came so far. So you've got to get up and fight. Then Arjuna will tell him, Krishna, we say that these people are not doing the right thing by fighting with us, the Kauravas. Now, if we also go and do it, in what way are we any the less than them? I mean, what way are we better? Now he puts it as we, like as if Krishna is part of this whole deal. Krishna never wanted the war. And then Krishna will tell him that you're getting unnecessarily upset about it because you said it when they were disrobing Draupadi and things like that. Then he tries all sort of rationalizations to get away from it. But Krishna answers everything. He said, because of this. Now what do you want to do? He says. And then from there he goes on to ask him about the philosophy of life. And Krishna uses this situation so that everybody knows what the value systems are all about. But the point is, when he is talking to Arjuna, he makes the whole army stand still. They don't know what he's talking. They go into like a trance, so they don't know what's happening. Only later Sanjaya says, only Sanjaya can see what's happening. So then when Krishna tells him, and Sanjaya says this is what he's saying, then he talks about Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and he says eventually, and this Arjuna will go on questioning him, and at the end he'll say, listen buddy, don't bother about all these things, just trust me and come, and you'll be okay. I'll take care of everything, because after all what is dying is only the body, it is not the Atma. Atma never dies. So then Arjuna will say, okay, now I understand. Now that's where people, commentators will say in the beginning Rama was crying, then at the end it was Krishna who cried, because, I mean, in a jocular way they'll say it, because after talking so much about surrender and everything, and Arjuna says, I understand, I surrender. Because surrendering means the I is not there.
Oh, okay.
Surrendering has to happen spontaneously. When you say I surrender, it's your ego talking. So that was used in that situation. Because much later at the end, Krishna has a talk with Uddhava before he dies. And Uddhava is another very close friend of his. He doesn't tell him that you have to go and fight, protect Dharma and all. He says, go sit and meditate, because he has evolved higher than Arjuna. He knows Arjuna, if he sits quietly also, his mind will be on all these things that happen, and why didn't I fight, why didn't I do something about it? So he knows that won't help Arjuna.
Okay.
Auntie, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Anyway.
My question, last time in the group you gave a mantra, Om Ram Hari Markata Markataye Swaha. Does that mantra have a meaning?
See, these are Bija mantras. Bija mantras do have a meaning, but it's not a meaning that we can explain at this time. Because then you will have to have a whole class on mantras. Ha stands for something, Ra for something, Ra is fire, Ha is for Shiva, like that. A is Vishnu, E is Devi, Shakti, is the, when you say like Om, the Nada and Bindu, so you will have to understand all that to understand the mantra. But these mantras don't have you don't have to bother about meanings. It's not like saying something. It is the energy of that deity's body.
Okay, thank you, Auntie.
Thank you, Auntie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Auntie.
So good.
Thank you, Auntie.
Thank you.
Hari Om, Auntie. Thank you.
Hari Om.
And I'll send you that song also. Practice it. We'll do it all together one day.
Okay,
4
Auntie.
days. We've got to organize it.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Hari Om.
Thank you, Auntie. Good night. Good night.
Good night. What do I do?
Just click the red button. The red button. Hari Om.
How is the video quality on her side so good? Does she have like a webcam?